Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rake the Take, a golf betting podcast hosted by me, Chris Lewis. And this week, we're going over the RSM Classic. But first, let's just go over a quick little recap of what happened last week. And I have to say, it was another disappointing week. Felt very close with Brandon Wu going into the final day. I mean, it felt like if he, just looking at the final round, he had definitely had some opportunities to kind of get into the top 20 there, which is really frustrating that he didn't. And it just seemed like he had a really slow start to the tournament on Thursday with way too many bogeys. But I mean, I think my process around him was sound. It was his best performance at the Bermuda Championship, rather, I should say. And then looking at my other plays, Camilo Villegas, it really was. I mean, it's kind of similar what happened with him. He had a great Friday and Saturday, just like Brandon Wu, and just kind of faltered and kind of lost ground on where he did some really good stuff on Thursday and Sunday, which is really disappointing. Connor Jones, the amateur I took, other than Miles Russell, he had a good start to the tournament and then just didn't really do anything, even though he made the cut. But he's an amateur, so I kind of understand that. Bill Haas, he didn't really have a good week, even though he did show some solid play on Friday, making an eagle on 7. But overall, no. I mean, just too many bogeys for him as well. And then Miles Russell, he honestly was really impressive of how he bounced back to begin the tournament. But, I just think maybe the wind probably got to him a bit. Maybe he's not too experienced dealing with that, but that's okay. I still think that Russell was a good play given his upside. And just kind of overall looking at the tournament, I mean, it didn't really seem like that I was too far off with my strategy. Just maybe different names that ended up doing well. Like Rafael Campos being the winner. I mean, there were numbers as high as plus 35,000 that I saw for him. So it was not like I was coming into this week with a bad strategy. I think that there was a lot of value that you could have found on the betting board. Adrian Dumont de Chessart, he was another player who has just been really struggling this year. That ended up having a spike week, finishing within the top 5. So it's really tough to be able to kind of parse where we did poorly and what went well, because it feels like to me that the idea that I had was a good strategy. It's paid off in years past. So it's just kind of narrowing it down a little bit better in the future and seeing what else we can get. Because I definitely feel like I was on the right path there in terms of, finding somebody way deep down the board and avoiding the top of the board where everybody was really priced down. I mean, as maybe some of you saw or learned the hard way, a lot of those guys did not end up giving you a return on investment. So, like the people at the top of the board. But yeah, who am I to say? Who am I to talk, really? I didn't hit anything. But yeah, no, I mean, it's a kind of a go big or go home event. But let's move on. We got the really the last big field event of 2024 for the PGA Tour with the RSM Classic. There's a couple more events after this. You have the Hero World Challenge in a couple weeks, and then you also have the Q School finals which should be interesting to see. Uh, However, I don't really know how much data they'll have for that event, but I'm kind of up in the air whether or not I should cover it or not. But I think I probably will, just to keep doing something. Um, kind of in between now and the Century Tournament of Champions. I mean, kind of looking at the schedule. Um, we have this week, and then there's a week off basically for Thanksgiving for golf. There's nothing next week really anywhere around the world, and then kind of going into actually there's the Australian Open, so which is a DP World Tour event. So I don't, who knows? Maybe things will be different that week. Um, but then we get the Hero World Challenge the week after that, and then Q School, and then there's the Asia Bank Mauritius Open. Then we have Christmas, whereas there's nothing, and then we're back, kind of the next week, beginning the new year with the Century Tournament of Champions in Kapalua. So the new season really is not that far away. It's really, it's kind of coming up fast, to be honest with you. It's crazy. The new year is so close. But overall, though, I think I probably will just keep going, doing a podcast every week and going through these DP World Tour events before we really go hard on the PGA Tour this year. Doing a lot. We're gonna do a lot. I guarantee you that. But yeah, let's just gonna get into the event. RSM Classic. It takes place at the at Sea Island Golf Club. This is one of those events where they go through two different courses. They have the Seaside course and the Plantation course at Sea Island Golf Club. 3 of the rounds are played at the Seaside course, and then you have 1 round played at the Plantation course. And the way they do that is half the field begins at Seaside and the other half begins at Plantation, and then they flip-flop, I should say, the next day. And then after that, whoever makes the cut after 36 holes will both play. They'll all play the Seaside course on Saturday and Sunday. It's a really short course, the Seaside one, which is where we have the majority of the data for this week. The Plantation course really does not have any strokes gained or shot link data. So it's hard to really kind of understand how that course plays relative to this one, but they're very similar overall in quality. Both are very easy, and I think if you were to make a model for the Plantation course, it would be very similar to the Seaside course based on how the courses are designed. Even though statistically we can't really decisively say that overall, but in terms of yardage and just kind of course architecture, they are very similar. So if they're a good fit at Seaside, they're probably a good fit at the Plantation course. So the guys that I have selected this week are pretty solid bets to be good at the Seaside course. Therefore, I'm not worried about them at Plantation. Just putting that out there. But yeah, both of the courses are around 6,800 to 6,900 yards. They're very short. Distance is really not a major factor this week at all. And then in terms of really just other skill sets, you obviously need to be accurate off the tee. Distance isn't going to be a huge factor, but you do need to be able to play out of the fairway and just keep your ball dry, because there's a lot of water on this course, or on both courses. And I think just being able to play out of the fairway is going to keep everything a lot easier for you, because this event is really all about being able to make putts. Uh, so I wouldn't want to say that um, if you really look at the course history, um, approach play is not as important as putting or short game. I would say that, but I mean, obviously, if you're a good approach player and you're able to create a lot of opportunities for yourself, I mean, that's going to carry you anywhere, no matter the course fit. But I do think that at this course, as long as you're able to make the greens in regulation, you should have a lot of looks to be able to just make putts. Most of the people that we've seen who have done well here historically are good putters, um, and you really just need to be able to make fairways, make greens, and make putts. It's that simple. Um, I don't think this is necessarily a course that's going to favor the best hitters of the golf ball in terms of distance and approach. Even though you did see Ludwig win here last year, like I'm not saying that a great ball striker can't win here. Of course, I'm just saying that this course levels the playing field for everybody because it's a shorter course. The non-distance players can create good looks for birdie, um, and that's really all that matters is that you're able to have a level of consistency in scoring, no matter how you do it. But putting, even if you aren't necessarily hitting it within, um, you know, 10 to 15 feet or lower, uh, you can make putts from a longer distance. Um, but yeah, no, I think that's kind of how I'm going at this event for this week. I'm really looking at guys who are good off the good off the tee in terms of accuracy, people who can make putts, people who have solid wedges and can do stuff around the green if it's not going well. Around the green ability is probably not going to be a major skill set this week, but it I do just because the course is really easy. But I do think that it is maybe a bit of an underrated skill set to have if things go wrong. Um, just because, they're given how the course is set up, you may be able to make in an easy chip in or things like that. So if you're proficient around the greens and that's a big part of your scoring, then yeah. I mean, I think that the shots around the greens are easy enough to where yeah you could make a lot of those shots pretty easily. So I do value a good short game overall, even though I don't think that around the green is going to be the most predictive skill set in deciding the winner this week. But yeah, those enough about the skill sets and stats. Let's kind of go over the card and who we got this week. Um, I really like Matt McCarty. He's the guy who's kind of leading off my card this week. He's been playing really well this year on the Korn Ferry Tour. He's only played in 3 PGA Tour events since his transition or graduation from the Korn Ferry, but he won the Black Desert Championship. So it's pretty clear that his winning capabilities on the Korn Ferry Tour can translate to the PGA Tour level. And even though he missed the Shriners the Shriners Children Open right after the Black Desert Championship, I'm not too worried about that. I mean, obviously, there's the high of coming off a big win, um, your first PGA Tour win. So it's like, I mean, who really cares that he didn't play that well that week? Clearly, he has shown a lot of skill throughout the bag. And I think this is a course that sets up well for him. He's not the longest hitter off the tee, but he's incredibly accurate. So he's going to have a lot of looks with his approach shots. And from, an approach standpoint, I mean, he has gained on approach in both of his PGA Tour events. And he's also just been really good with the flat stick. I mean, he gained a ton of strokes putting at the Black Desert Championship. And, obviously we've seen that he's been able to make putts at the Korn Ferry Tour level with how much he's won there, which is really impressive. He's already a top 50 player in the world. So, I mean, that's amazing for her having only played three PGA Tour events and obviously having a great Corn Ferry history. But his four wins this year, I mean, why not rattle off another one? That would be very impressive, and I think he definitely would keep his name on notice going into 2025. But I really like this guy. I want to just get on his consistency now. He's at plus 5,000. Um, I think that's a really solid play. Given that a lot of the top tier names in this event, are uh, probably haven't been playing a lot of golf recently, outside of the Ben Griffins um, and the and the Mac Hugheses. But I mean, I just think if you look at this top of the board, there's not really a ton of guys I really want to bet. I mean, you got a guy like Sepp Straka at plus 5,000 too, but I mean, he hasn't played in a while, and I'm not really necessarily sure that he's in the best form right now either. I mean, yeah, he played a couple weeks in September at the BMW PGA Championship and the Spanish Open, but he didn't really play very well in either of those events. He didn't play well at the Tour Championship, even though he had a solid start at the BMW. But yeah, no, Sepp has not really been in great form. He's not really a guy I'm looking at, but I think McCarty, relative to that, I mean, it has been a lot more impressive. So it's like if I'm getting a guy that's won four times this year at plus 5,000, even though it's in a strong PGA Tour field relative to what he's been playing, um, I still like those odds. I mean, especially at a place that I think sets up well for his skill sets, on in terms of distance and on the other places throughout the bag. So, I mean, I think he's a guy that I'm kind of bullish on just because of the win pedigree early in his career so far. But I mean, why not? I mean, as we've seen, like, if guys like Ludwig last year, if you're hot winning events and you have that confidence, why not keep going with it? So I like Matt McCarty, and I feel like this could really be the first event where we could really see him as an up and coming PGA Tour player heading into next season. Um, but yeah, after that, I like Adam Hadwin. He's at plus 9,000, or at least what I got him at, and he's been in kind of rough shape since the his third place finish at the Memorial Tournament 5 months ago. But there's still some solid results in there, like a tie for 27th at the Travelers and a tie 34th at the Scottish Open. Both of those being designated events, and the Wyndham Championship, which was a really loaded PGA Tour field because it was the last event before the FedEx Cup playoffs. He finished tied 28th there. But yeah, outside of that, it's been kind of mediocre, some miscuts, some low finishes in fields that maybe he should have done better in. But, I think if you look at his skill set, I mean, it's just been very inconsistent. We know Adam Hadwin, though, is a good approach player. He has lost strokes gained on approach in four of his last five events, even though that the other skill sets have been fairly consistent. So I think with him, it's like if his approach play isn't really so hot right now, I feel like that's not the biggest detriment to him here. We know that's going to be a skill set that gets a lot better. I mean, right now it's ranking about tour average in terms of his strokes gained. So you really don't know what you're going to get with his approach play. Seems very hot and cold right now. But his other skill sets around the green, putting, driving, he's been pretty solid. And relative to the PGA Tour. So, I think because of that, like I just feel confident in him as a player that can do well here, even though his course history isn't the best. I do like the overall course fit for him here, just because I think he's very accurate off the tee and he has a very good short game. So I don't think it's going to. I feel like it's a good opportunity to buy low on him, because he should have a lot better history here than he does. Maybe that's obviously there's something I'm overlooking, but I think I'm willing to look past the course history here and just buy low on a player that I think should be doing a lot better at this type of course, and just in general. So I like Hadwin. I think he has a good skill set. He is a good golfer. So I'm willing to kind of take that chance on him this week. Another guy that I like at the same price is Chandler Phillips. Um, he's another player who's just very well rounded throughout the bag. He pretty much it grades out as average or better at every category, besides distance, really, and some approach categories too. But I think that's also maybe a victim of small sample size and recent history, just because he's a Korn Ferry graduate from 2023. We don't necessarily have a lot of the same data as we would for other players, but his approach play at the beginning of the season up until the Canadian Open was extremely consistent. And then ever since then, he's fallen off a little bit, but still very good putting, making a lot of fairways. His accuracy has been very good. So I really like to see that. And I think that this is a place that, now that he's not necessarily playing some of these more difficult events, that he could definitely bounce back in. As we saw in the earlier part of the year, kind of when some of these shorter courses that they do play, he was really able to excel on approach. So I think that could definitely be an aspect of his game that could bounce back this week. So I like Chandler Phillips. He's shown some good form this season, having had, let's see, he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 finishes within the top 25. And 2 of those are top 10s, where he has a tie for 10th finish at the RBC Canadian Open and a tie for 3rd finish at the Valspar Championship. So clearly, he does have some room to be able to do well at some of these shorter events where accuracy is a premium skill set. So I like his game, and I think it does set up well for him here. He's just coming off a tie for 20th finish at the Worldwide Technology Championship. So, yeah, I mean, why not? I think this could definitely be a place where Phillips could succeed, even though we don't have any course history data for him. After that, I like Bud Cauley. He's a player that just came off of a major surgery, not just recently, but he just started playing events again this year at the beginning of 2024. He stopped playing in 2020 and had to go through a lot of life changes. And, it's just amazing that he was able to kind of come back and play on the PGA Tour this year with an injury exemption. And honestly, he hasn't been that bad. He's had some rough starts kind of in the middle of the season here, but after at the Sanderson Farms was when he really started to show that he could perform at a high level again. He had a tie for 5th finish that week. And surrounding that, a tie for 32 at the Procore. He missed a cut at the Black Desert Championship, and then a tie for 34th finish at the Shriners. So he's able to bounce back after that missed cut, which you like to see. And then he hasn't played since then. But given those last 4 events, I mean, that is incredibly encouraging to see from him. And the fact that he can play well at a course like this again, is something that I'm very much looking forward to. He did kind of have some flash events in the beginning of his comeback, like a tie for 21st finish at the Cognizant Classic. He was, very much in that event in the early part of it, but then kind of fell off. I think that this could definitely be a big comeback spot for him. We've seen him play well at this event in the way distant past, and this is a place where I don't think it would be overwhelming for him, having a lot of course familiarity. And overall, though, you can also see he's very accurate off the tee throughout this year. Putting hasn't always been one of his consistencies, but he is a decent ball striker on approach. He's usually very dialed in with his wedges throughout his career. So we know that he can be a good ball striker. It's just a matter of, whether or not he still has that consistency, because tee to green, when he was on the PGA Tour originally, he was one of the more consistent tee to green guys on the whole tour. And then now, obviously, it's like it's still we're still kind of figuring that out, but he's still gaining strokes consistently around the greens. It's a bit of it's a bit of hit or miss with on approach, but I mean off the tee, it's been pretty consistent in terms of accuracy. Um, so why not? I think this could be an event where we could see Bud Cauley come back and do really well. I mean, given some course history and just overall kind of good form going into this event, why not? Even though it's been a long time, I still think Bud Cauley's got some good golf in him. Now that he's kind of overcome this mini injury, that or not mini injury, big injury. Um, but yeah, no, I like it where his game is at, and I think he's definitely a player that's trending back towards where he was at before all of this occurred. Um, Moving on, I like Brendan Todd this week, and he's been kind of on a sharp decline over the past few weeks, despite a good end to the PGA Tour season, where he had a top 20 at the John Deere and at the Wyndham Championship, a tied for 22nd finish at the FedEx St. Jude Championship, and even a tie for 31st finish at the Open Championship, which is a really solid finish for him given the difficulty of that event. But ever really since like the Pro Court Championship, I mean his wedge play has been abysmal. But I mean we've seen this happen to him in recent history too, where his wedge play is just really falls off and it's not good at all. But I think he can bounce back from that. I mean I especially playing at a course like this where he can call it home. He's a Georgia guy. Like I mean, he knows this place. Probably by he could probably play it blind basically. But I mean, those who know Todd don't need really any introduction to his skill sets. He's a great putter. He has a good short game. The approach play is very streaky throughout his career. And it's something that like in most recent events it's been a consistent loser, but that hasn't always been the case. I think that's something that he can gain back, and it can come back to him, kind of like we saw with Matt Kuchar recently. But obviously he's never been far off the tee, but he has some of the best accuracy in the world. So if Brendan Todd could get the approach play back, I like his chances. I have him at plus 13,500. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to say that I have Bud Cauley at plus 10,000. So I really like these kind of guys that are back here. These players that really know this course. And yeah, no, I mean, I think that's just a good number for Todd. And then after that, we got Chad Ramey. And Chad Ramey, kind of like a lot of these other guys, he's great off the tee in terms of accuracy. He's an amazing putter, has a decent short game, but his approach play has been lacking this season. Definitely has not been one of his best skill sets. Whenever he does well, it's typically because he's putting great. But we've seen him been able to have some very solid starts this season. He has a tied for 23rd finish at the Shriners and a tied for 21st in the Black Desert Championship. Most recently, he finished tied for 29th at the Bermuda. So I mean, he's not in terrible form right now. I mean, he's made the cut in his last 5 events. He had to withdraw from the Sanderson Farms, but before that, I mean, he made his last 5 cuts before the Sanderson Farms. So maybe something kind of weird happened there, but he's playing pretty well. His putter's been very consistent, which I love to see here. It's just a matter of whether or not he can have some good approach play. I think that's possible. He's very accurate off the tee, like I said. And, even if he doesn't have the best approach play in the world, I love to see a good putter. And this isn't really an event where, we've seen him play a ton, but in both of the events, it seems like he has actually had decent ball striking numbers throughout the week. I mean, at this course, but he just hasn't been able to do well at the Plantation course. So if he can just do well if he can just do well at the plantation course finally, then he should have some good success here because his numbers, especially from a ball striking perspective, are objectively good at the seaside course. So, um, I think if we can just get him into the weekend, I think Ramey is a good play to potentially do well this week. He's at plus 15,000, so definitely worth a little bit of a punt there. Zach Johnson, he's another guy I have. He's also at plus 15,000, and he lives in this area. Um, and if you just kind of look at his course history, that's evident. Where he has a tie sixth, a tie seventh, and a tie eighth. Even though it's like this is obviously not in the best form that we've seen Zach Johnson in his career. He's actually been having good enough finishes at the places where he needs to, like a top 20 tie for 20th finish at the CJ Cup. A tie for 21st at the Cognizant Classic, tie for 25th at the American Express, tie for 33rd at the Wyndham. So if you look at, and also a tie for 26th at the John Deere Classic. So even though these aren't like inspiring results per se, it shows that he's able to do well at the courses that he needs to do well at. And some of the, like, obviously some of these other events he hasn't done as well, but I do think, considering that those performances and results, it's very possible that we could see a top 20 this week from Zach Johnson. I think that he can definitely make it up there this week. This is not an event where I think you need to be the longest hitter, like I said, or you can be a 48-year-old and win this event. So I do like Zach Johnson. He's still so accurate off the tee. He's a good putter, has a good short game, and I think that this is a place where he can kind of overcome those wedge play concerns that have kind of plagued him over his recent years of his career. Because he used to be a very good wedge player, very good approach player, and that part of his game has kind of decreased majorly over the past few seasons, probably because of his age. But, I think this is a place, especially given his familiarity with the course, where he could definitely do well. Nate Lashley. He's the next guy on my card. Oh, yeah, and Zach Johnson, by the way, he's also at plus 15,000. But yeah, Nate Lashley, Nasty Nate. We're back on him again after the disappointment from the Worldwide Technology Championship. But, I do think that this is probably a solid event for him. Even though he hasn't had amazing results here in the past, I do think that because of where he's at distance-wise, that this is definitely an event where he could do well. He's lost a lot of distance this year, but he's still very accurate off the tee, and his around the green game and putting have been pretty good. The approach play has been pretty solid, especially on shorter approach shots, which he'll be seeing a lot of this week, given the course layout and setup. So I think that this could be a good spot for Nasty Nate Lashley at plus 17,500. And Lashley, I mean, kind of, we don't need to really go over him too much again, but he has had some solid performances kind of going into the Worldwide Technology Championship. He hasn't really played well the past two events, like as we saw from the Worldwide, and he didn't make the cut at the Bermuda. But I'm kind of willing to overlook a lot of those things because of the Worldwide's one thing. We definitely were disappointed about that, but at the Bermuda, the conditions might have just not set up well for him. It seemed like he was pretty accurate and had some good distance off the tee, but maybe it just was from an iron play perspective, wasn't necessarily the best event, or he wasn't able to make a lot of putts. You don't really know, especially because we don't have the shot link data from those events. But, I'm willing to go back to him one more time this year before we go into 2025, just to see what can happen. I mean, he's 115th in the FedEx Cup, so it's not like, some of these other guys that I've taken are kind of on the outside looking in at the top 125. But, it's just kind of maybe he will have a good week to just kind of seal that up. Um, and so it's not something to worry about anymore. But in terms of an accuracy and around the green game perspective, I do like what I see from him. And then Martin Laird, he's one of the last people on my card. Um, it's a pretty full card this week, I got to say. But yeah, no, Martin Laird, I do like him this week, even though he's been having a bad season overall. There's still some things I like about his game. He's a good putter, which I love to see here, and his around the green game has been great. He's still very accurate off the tee, but it's just his approach play and driving distance have not been there. The total ball striking has just been disappointing, but I think that's largely comes from a span of events, where from between the John Deere and the Wyndham, where he just had a month of just abysmal iron play. And then outside of that, it's been kind of hit or miss. So it's like I'd rather just have kind of hit or miss than the atrocities that occurred that month between the John Deere and the Wyndham Championship. Who knows what was going on there? I mean, because Martin Laird used to be a very consistent approach player a couple years ago. So it's kind of strange to see that this skill set has gone by the wayside for him. But overall, I still think that I still like to see that those main skill sets that I was looking at are good this week. And if he can just kind of improve a little bit on approach, I think that would be a major sign of success. You look at the course history here, that hasn't necessarily been the case, but I still think that at his age and where he's at in the FedEx Cup, that he could be looking for a good week. He is coming off of a tied 37th at the Butterfield Bermuda Championship and a tie for 42nd at the Worldwide Technology Classic. So, it's tough to say that he's going to do well this week, but at plus 25,000, I mean, I think that's a good bet. Just because I think, if you look at his results from earlier this season, look at the Cognizant Classic and the Puerto Rico Open, he was able to have some good events. He had a good string of events. After that, kind of leading up to the Charles Schwab, right before this kind of big slump with his wedge play. But maybe he's getting out of that, now that he's kind of finishing around the top 40 again. And given where his course fit profile is at right now, I don't see why he couldn't do well here. So I like Martin Laird. I think this is a solid spot for kind of buy low. And then finally, Brandt Snedeker is the final person on my card. Still waiting for my book to actually post his odds, but I put in a request, so hopefully they do that. But Snedeker, he's priced around on some other books around plus 75,000, plus 60,000. He's pretty far back there, obviously, because of his age and where he's at. But what we know from Brandt is that he is obviously very accurate off the tee. He's a great putter, one of the best putters of all time. But not necessarily right now, but in the past. His around the green game has been solid since his return to the PGA Tour this year. And his approach play has been good from 50 to 100 yards. The other distances, not so much. Been very bad. But obviously he has no distance because of how old he is. But that doesn't matter here. And the lack of real consistent approach play, I don't think really matters either. I'm just happy to see that his putting and around the green game have been really good. And it seems like the approach play is kind of coming back a little bit. If you look at the Sanderson Farms, the Czech Masters, the Procore Championship, all those events he finished within the top 30 and the top 20 at the Sanderson Farms and the Czech Masters, by themselves. He missed the cut at the Bermuda, big whoop. It was really windy. Who cares? And then kind of before that, he was missing a bunch of cuts as well. But, I think the fact that he was kind of able to overcome a lot of these struggles and at least starting to have some good events. I mean, I think that shows that things are on the upturn for Brandt Snedeker, especially considering that the approach play is starting to be a lot more consistent, and that was his big time bugaboo um, for the majority of this season. Um, so I think now that Brant has kind of been back in better form, going to a place where he, has where he's played before, not necessarily the best results, but I do think that he could play well here, um, given the circumstances of his career. And if I do get that, if I do get whatever the number I get, I'm gonna take him just to see what happens. But yeah, that's my card for this week. Thank you all for listening, and good luck with the RSM Classic.